Traveling up and down the Rockies from Denver Union Station to Winter Park and back, Amtrak's Winter Park Express takes skiers to the Winter Park Ski Resort and back during the ski season. This train runs on a portion of line that the iconic California Zephyr also operates on, yet this train has a history that goes back well over 100 years and has a story that's just as big as the Zephyr that it shares tracks with. And in this video, you will see and learn just that. How the ski train came to be, how it would go away for years, and how it would return. For this train has been a Denver tradition for generations. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the fact that a lot of my sources and info about the ski train come from this book, The Ski Train, by Steve Patterson and Kenton Forrest, Colorado Experience, The Ski Train, made by Rocky Mountain PBS, and Ski Train to Winter Park by Walt Lovey. All credit for information and footage goes to all three of these. And honestly, without these, I would not have nearly as much info on the ski train to go by for this video. So a huge shout out to them. Of course, to have the ski train, you need to have the tracks and the resorts. The tracks were what came first. In 1902, businessman David Moffett sought to fill a gap in Denver's railroad network, as by then trains went east, north, and south of Denver, but not west of Denver. Back then, if you wanted to go west of Denver by train, you had to either go up into Wyoming or down south to Pueblo and traverse the hazardous Tennessee Pass line. He created the Denver, Northwestern, and Pacific Railroad, intending to build a line to Salt Lake City going directly west from Denver. And by then, he had a lot of experience with railroads, including helping to build the Denver Pacific Railway and Telegraph Company, the first railroad in Colorado, and even working with the Rio Grande by standard gauging the Tennessee Pass line. Unlike a lot of other lines through mountains, though, which could often have grades up to 3 or 4%, the DNW&P route had the exact grade that most steam engines could handle, 2%. This would result in the line being quite twisty, especially Big Ten Curve, and speaking of which, I would like to make a serious correction from a previous video. Big Ten Curve actually got its name because of the sharp 10-degree turn trains had to negotiate, not because of the rail cars loaded on the siding full of rock. Got it? Okay, moving on. But anyways, when the railroad reached the Continental Divide, Moffett wanted to build a tunnel, but that would have gotten super costly and would have involved them going for broke and praying that they make the money back to eventually build further. Moffett decided to build the DNW&P up and over the mountains, and then later on, build the tunnel. This line would become not only the tallest line in North America, but also a nightmare to operate. Grades up to 4%, the need for helpers constantly, avalanches, the heaviest snows necessitating rotaries, runaway trains, you name it. This line would be a serious thorn in the DNW&P's side, and David Moffat's fortune would dry up. But despite this, the railroad would still make it to the western coal mines, including towns like Fraser, Hot Sulphur Springs, Kremling, and as far west as Steamboat Springs by the time Moffett died. Remember the Hot Sulphur Springs one. It'll be important later. Actually, it'll be important right now. The man that we really have to give credit for making the ski train exist is this man, Carl Havelsen. Originally Norwegian, he would make it to Denver in 1905 and settled there. Then in 1911, a few days after Christmas, Carl Havelsen and another Norwegian, Angel Schmidt, boarded a DNWMP train from Denver and took their skis with them, looking for a good place to ski. They got off the train up top of the treacherous Rollins Pass. They skied 44 miles from there to the town of Hot Sulphur Springs. And by coincidence, a man from Switzerland, John Payer, had met up with other town sportsmen and decided to have a winter sports club in Hot Sulphur Springs and promoted a winter carnival on December 30th. Carl and Angel arrived at Hot Sulphur Springs when the carnival was happening, and they managed to make an agreement with John to demonstrate their skill of ski jumping with a hastily built jump behind Payer's house. That is what they did, and they did it successfully. Not only that, but the Winter Carnival was so successful that they'd have another just 6 weeks later, and the Denver Northwestern and Pacific would operate snow trains to Hot Sulphur Springs, where they would sell 2,200 tickets for $1.75 each, which would cost $56.95 today. And these winter carnivals at Hot Sulphur Springs would continue until 1940. Not only that, but these were some of the first origins of the ski train. Of course, there's the fact that Carl and Angel would return to the second winter carnival and demonstrate their ski jump, as well as the fact that Carl would be the reason for Steamboat Springs' success with being a skiing location. But that's another story. However, despite these snow trains taking passengers to Hot Sulphur Springs, bringing in revenue for the railroad, that treacherous Rollins Pass section still resulted in the DNWMP and later the Denver and Salt Lake Railroad to be in Spain. Without the S, of course. You can't spell Spain without pain after all. But in the early 1920s, bonds were issued to allow a tunnel for the D&SL to be built. This tunnel would be named the Moffett Tunnel, after David Moffett, and from 1923 to 1927, construction of the tunnel would occur. A water tunnel would also be built next to the Moffett Tunnel, but that's not important for this story. And on February 18, 1927, the tunnel was holed through by a blast of dynamite set off by President Calvin Coolidge turning a key in Washington, D.C. They were only off by an inch. 1 year later, the first passenger train, pulled by a 2660, would travel through the tunnel on February 28, 1928. The tunnel would lift a massive weight off of the D&SL's shoulders, and the line over Rollins Pass is now a trail. With the opening of the Dot Zero cutoff in 1934, Denver finally had its rail line that went west. Back to the snow trains. Some of the more immediate predecessors to the ski train were various excursions that were sponsored by various papers or clubs. One of these such excursions was sponsored by the Rocky Mountain News. They would advertise an excursion for February 9th, 1936 to the 25th Annual U.S. Western Ski Tournament and the Winter Sports Carnival, and 2,000 tickets would sell for the train, with the paper especially going hard on the advertising with advertisements of hot breakfast and lunch on the train. This was a success. And the next year, 1937, the Rocky Mountain News sponsored another series of Moffett specials carrying skiers and other winter enthusiasts. Although they sold 1,500 tickets this time around, it was clear people wanted to travel by train to ski. These snow trains, sponsored by the News, though, wouldn't last that long, as World War II and the end of the winter carnivals at Hot Sulphur Springs meant the snow trains would stop running. But by this point, the seeds for the true Rio Grande Ski Train was about to bear its fruit. How? Well, it has to do with the west portal of the Moffett Tunnel. Now, you're probably thinking, wait, there's the snow trains, but where's the actual ski train? We're getting there, I promise. But we need to talk about Winter Park first, because without Winter Park, there's no ski train in this story. Remember the Moffat Tunnel? Well, originally when the tunnel opened, the east side was named East Portal, and the west side West Portal. However, West Portal was also popular with some people who take weekend retreats to ski, and the station would often house some of the most adventurous of people. Those who'd ski, hike, you name it. One of these was George Cranmer. His story about the outdoors and other contributions is so long that if I were to explain everything he did, we'd be here all day. So for now, we're talking about Winter Park. George Cranmer, in 1937, proposed the idea of the city of Denver to have its own winter playground. But the city was not interested, since they were wondering why they would use their own taxpayer dollars to fund a winter area. The media also was not helping either, as they saw the idea as some scheme for the rich to have a place that was funded by the taxpayer too. But eventually the city did approve him to build a $30,000 ski tow along the site, and dedicated it as Winter Park. The Winter Park Resort's history is a bigger story in and of itself, but right now we're talking about the ski train. When Winter Park opened, not only was West Portal renamed to Winter Park to reflect the changes, but the Denver and Salt Lake Railroad would operate a special train up to Winter Park to dedicate Winter Park. Although many see this as the official beginning of the ski train, in reality it was only a charter train and not an official service. From 1940 until 1947, if you wanted to go to Winter Park by train, you had to go on to one of the regular trains. Though 1947 is when the official ski train service began. How? During this time, a man named Frank Bulkley would teach girls from a girls' school to ski at Winter Park, and they'd make use of the special charter trains. But when World War II happened, the charter trains came to an end, putting a stop to that and their group activities. But once the war was over, many people, including his ski group, would start flocking to the slopes. However, the way by bus was, and still is, treacherous, and he couldn't exactly consistently make do with the regular Denver and Salt Lake passenger trains. However, Bulkley seemed to have had a better understanding of the passenger trains than most of the management. He would write an 8-page letter to passenger traffic manager Harold Eno of the Denver and Rio Grande Western, as by this point the DNSL was officially merged into the Rio Grande, on how to run ski trains, such as remodeling equipment to handle skiers and their equipment, and to run on more convenient schedules for the ski passengers. After a bit of not hearing back, Frank called, and Eno responded asking if he was the man who made the 8-page letter. He said yes. The Rio Grande had listened to him. After making the necessary improvements so that trains would be able to stop only feet from the ski slopes, finally on the week before Christmas 1947, the first ski trains ran, running from Union Station in Denver to the slopes of Winter Park. They were immediate successes, so much that the Rio Grande would often need to borrow cars from the Burlington, Mopac, and the Santa Fe just to meet these passenger demands. These trains would have started running at the beginning of the Christmas holidays and would run until April, and often it was the young and adventurous who'd ride these trains through clubs like the Eskimo Ski Club or individually. I mean, hey, we don't know how long we're gonna live. Might as well do all the cool things now rather than later, because that is what we young folk do. At first, these trains consisted of the heavyweight coaches and steam locomotives to lead, mainly 484 Westerns, But it is possible that other locomotives like the 482s and 2882s were also used. Later on, steam locomotives that initially ran these trains would be replaced with diesels, as the Rio Grande dieselized pretty quickly since they weren't exactly in a good financial position by the 1950s. But the ski train's popularity continued on, and in 1969, Frank Bulkley, who started it all, would state that the ski train has become an institution. This, though, was during the time the ski train was in decline. By the 50s and 60s, passenger trains were in decline all across America. For the Rio Grande in particular, as early as 1955, there were disagreements between the operating department and passenger traffic representatives over the costs to operate the trains, and upper management was starting to want out of the passenger business. However, they would keep in the passenger business until the 80s, but that was not without issues, especially for the ski train. The Rio Grande heavily promoted its California Zephyr and other trains that were regularly on the timetable, but not so much the ski train. This, though, was not too much of an issue because the ski train was pretty much very popular. What was an issue was that the train was often unsupervised, so some random person could do something wrong, which did happen in fact, as a prankster pulled an emergency brake cord on the train on February 26, 1960, and the train had to leave coach 971 behind because of a broken steam line and coupler. And yes, the book does mention him as a prankster. Oh yeah, and speaking of steam lines, did I mention old equipment? Through the beginning until the 1980s, these trains ran with old equipment dating to the 1910s, and these would cause problems with delays and especially a lack of equipment at times. And in addition, in 1966, the Rio Grande would impose a 19-car limit since oftentimes they had so many cars, they would even need to unload passenger trains inside the Moffat Tunnel. Not only that, but after an incident with a picnic charter train in 1964, because of the many lawsuits, the law department convinced the management to seize all extra trains. This wasn't able to kill the train at the time, but things weren't looking too good, as the next year, in 1967, the snack car on the ski train was taken off the ski train. Although this would result in some people just selling food on the ski train from things that weren't the Rio Grande, and the Rio Grande just didn't bother doing anything about it. There were still equipment shortage issues though, such as in the 1969 and 1970 season, where the Rio Grande worried that it would not have enough equipment to meet the demands for the ski train. Even worse, by the 70s, the Rio Grande had a vice president and general manager, William Holtman, who was super concerned about people crossing the tracks at the mouth of the Moffat Tunnel, which, yes, this is unsafe, not to mention stupid, but the way he wanted to deal with it was to put a squeeze on the train, or to pressure the train. In 1963, he stated that the train would start to be parked at Tabernash, but later he agreed with Bulkley that the train would be parked at Crane Siding for one more year in exchange for him not protesting the train being discontinued in 1974, as the Rio Grande, like other railroads around this time, was looking for any way to unload themselves from having to operate passenger trains. Southern Pacific! Whether that be by giving them to Amtrak or just canning the trains entirely. To which, not long afterwards, one of the biggest insults to injury for the ski train was when the man who organized it all, Frank Bulkley, said that he would begin to use buses rather than the ski train to carry his ski group starting in 1973. The man who organized it all in the first place backstabbed the train. But despite this, by a Christmas miracle, the train was never discontinued at the time being anyways, but people thought the train would come to an end soon. But hope would come for the train, and it would come during the 1980s. Despite the attempts to discontinue the ski train, it would continue running until the 1980s, especially with the old equipment, and it seemed pretty standard for many. However, in 1984, businessman Philip Anschutz purchased the Denver and Rio Grande Western, and with the purchase of the Denver and Rio Grande Western, the ski train came in under his hands, and a lot of people got very concerned about what he would do to the ski train. Fortunately, Anschutz wasn't exactly that out of touch, as he delighted in traveling on the railroad and even bought a few lounge and observation cars to entertain family and friends. And he believed that the ski train would be more pleasant for passengers if the coaches they were riding on were more spacious and comfortable. Which, well, look at this photo of the ski train and tell me that this is what you want to ride in if you want to go up to ski slopes. No, this is commuter train seating, not a seating for a special ski train. So he sent some boys to scout for new ski train cars to replace the older heavyweight cars. Around this time, the Rio Grande had gave up its regular passenger trains to Amtrak. Via Rail was interested in getting 2 dome cars from the California Zephyr, and a San Francisco businessman by the name of Vincent De Domenico, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, was envisioning a train in the style of the trains of the 1920s, rolling through California wine country in Napa Valley. This would result in a major exchange. In exchange for some of Via Rail's Tempo cars, Via Rail would gain 2 XCZ Dome cars, and the 1910s era heavyweights would be sold to California. The heavyweights made their last runs on the ski train for the 1986-87 season, after which they would be taken off the ski train and sent to the Napa Valley in Cali. But the cars were so old that they were restricted to 30 miles per hour while traveling towards Napa Valley. After arriving in Napa, these heavyweights would later get a complete makeover. Everything inside the cars was torched, and they became shells. And all sorts of interior makeovers would be added in order to create the train De Domenico envisioned. The old ski train cars make up what is now the Napa Valley Wine Train. And when you look at the cars of the Napa Valley Wine Train, you wouldn't know that these cars once carried skiers for half a decade from Denver to the slopes and back. As for the Tempos, they arrived in Denver in 1987. However, these cars were designed to be powered by head-end power and not steam. So former Alco PB Unit 253, which was a steam heater car, became a head-end power car. The new train made a debut on December 10, 1987, though by this point they weren't in regular service yet, and people were absolutely amazed by it. Not only that, the train would once again start serving delectables, especially for breakfast, like coffee, orange juice, breakfast burritos, ham and cheese croissants, bagel and cream cheese, cinnamon rolls, muffins, and as a personal experience, I remember riding the train in 08 or 09, and I remember eating a waffle for breakfast during my ride on the ski train for ski school. Though ski school was a bit scary to me because I had to be separated from my dad. Anyways, the food service was a major welcome back, as before then, food service on the ski train was discontinued during the 1960s. Allowing for quite a few young people to start selling food on the ski train without the conductors or the railroad questioning them, to which some of them later became ski train employees. Finally, the new ski train made its first run on January 2nd, 1988, and the general public and skiers welcomed the new trains. I don't know how the foamers reacted to the ski train getting new cars and a makeover, but my only guess is that it wasn't exactly that good. But foamers were a very vocal minority, so they don't matter here. The ski train, though, would still use locomotives from the Rio Grande and later the Southern Pacific to head the train. Starting in the 2000 and 2001 ski season, the ski train would get F40PH locomotives from Amtrak to head the ski train, and it would continue for the next couple of years. For the next 20 years from 1988, the ski train would be in its renaissance. Of course, being named Ski Train, you'd think that it'd only operate in the winter, and then afterwards, all the equipment would be put away until the next winter. Right? The ski train was not just restricted to Denver and Winter Park. The ski train would go far. When the ski train wasn't taking skiers to the slopes, it would run during the non-winter months on these after-ski season journeys. Some of the most notable are when in 1989, the train went to Glenwood Canyon and along Tennessee Pass and into Leadvita Pass for filming of Paramount Pictures' Flashback. Even bigger was when in 1992, 94, and 96, the ski train would be used for the Cheyenne Frontier Days special. And in 1994 and 96, the Union Pacific Ferry 985 would pull the train, with 1996 having a double head with Union Pacific 844, the living legend. And if you thought that was grand, buckle up, boy, because the furthest trip the ski train went on was when the train traveled to Los Angeles and was pulled by Southern Pacific 2472 for the 1992 Earth train. 2472 pulled the train from Oakland to Los Angeles as the Pacific Limited, and then they'd return from LA to Oakland as the Earth train. In 2004, the ski train cars were used for the University of Iowa's football game trains, and in 2007, Union Pacific SD-78's number 1989 would lead the ski train. 1988 to 2009 was some of the best years for the ski train, and it saw so many trips to places beyond Denver and Winter Park that what I mentioned was probably only a fraction of the ski train's journeys beyond Denver and Winter Park that it went on before 2009. Speaking of which... By 2008, all sorts of things were beginning to plague the ski train. Increasing costs such as with liability insurance coverage, conflicts with freight trains, especially since at the time, coal traffic along the line was still constant compared to nowadays, uncertainties with the redevelopment of Denver Union Station as the temporary platform was only designed for just the California Zephyr, and as a final insult to injury for the ski train, the Great Recession occurred. All this resulted in the ski train making its final run in March of 2009. It was stored in the Burnham Yard shops for at least 2 months, because I remember seeing it in the Burnham Yard in May of 2009, but only thinking at the time, hey, cool orange and white train from Union Station is in yard that light rail train goes through. But the ski train was not staying in Denver. The ski train cars and equipment would be sold to the Algoma Central Railway, a CN subsidiary. Ironically, the cars that were sent away from Canada would be sent back to Canada. And those Tempo cars would return to their original owners, even if it is a subsidiary of CN. Iowa Pacific did try to revive the train, but issues stemming from crews being supplied by Amtrak came up, and those plans were ultimately canned. When the 2009 and 2010 season came, there was no ski train. Denver had lost a part of its history. Some believed that it would never get this train back ever again. Some wanted to believe that one day the ski train would maybe come back, but many truly believed that the ski train was gone for good, probably even forever. But there would later come hope, and that hope would come from an Amtrak conductor, a man by the name of Brad Swartzwelter. Brad Swartzwelter is the man who's credited for bringing back the ski train. Brad worked for Amtrak, but he had previously worked on the original ski train, and he wanted to bring the ski train back into action. And when looking at Union Station and how many tracks it had, it was clear that a new ski train could fit in the station. Of course, the obvious company that would operate the train would be Amtrak, but they would need to make Amtrak listen to them first. However, Brad wasn't the only one who wanted to bring the train back. Winter Park did too. To share his proposal, Brad would call Winter Park, and there wasn't even a special number he called, he just called the regular old number. I'm not making that up, he genuinely said that.
I called Winter Park Resort, and I just called the regular old public number. I said, listen, I work for Amtrak, I'm trying to put together this idea, I think we can do a ski train.
He would get in touch with Gary DeFrange, who took the call. Brad said that if they put up the right presentation, Amtrak would listen to them and bring back the ski train. Gary DeFrange was on board with bringing back the ski train, and so that is what they would do. After several negotiations with Amtrak, Winter Park, and Union Pacific, a trip to Winter Park and back was planned for March 14th to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Winter Park. They did not even advertise the train, and there was only like one news article in NPR or something. And yet, the train would sell out within 12 hours. They would add a trip for March 15th, and again, it sold out within hours. The demand was there, all they needed was the improvements to begin running the train. After several more negotiations and after making the improvements necessary to have trains stop feet from the ski slopes at Winter Park, the new ski train was ready, and they named it the Winter Park Express. The Winter Park Express would begin running in January of 2017, inaugurating with some equipment in wraps, including Amtrak MPCU 406 in a scheme which is at least making one foamer go mental and another claiming he's gonna commit self-termination. Over some pain. And it has been a success. 2 seasons later, a lounge/cafe car would be added so that people could have food aboard the train again. And although the train's 2019 and 2020 season was cut short because of COVID, and it wouldn't run for the 2020-2021 season, it came back for the 2021 and 2022 season, and has been fueled by not just skiers, but many non-skiers, resulting in the train being extended to Fraser Station to attract non-skiers, and as of now, starting before Christmas for the first time. And hopefully, as of the making of this video, it will have started running for the 2024-25 ski season. Although today, the ski train, which is now the Winter Park Express, isn't exactly that distinguishable from other Superliner-equipped Amtrak trains, this train has not only run safely and with popularity, but at a profit too. A bit of a rarity outside of Amtrak's Northeast Corridor. As of 2024, there are plans to expand the Winter Park Express further and to create a corridor known as Mountain Rail from Denver to Craig, capitalizing on the decrease in traffic from the Craig branch and restoring the Rio Grande's former Yampa Valley. and including front range passenger rail, other expansions could be seen. Maybe even a restoration of Tennessee Pass for passenger service too. As of now though, apart from front range passenger rail, which is in development, there are proposals, especially mountain rail, but if they happen, awesome. Brad Swartzwelter, who helped bring back the train, has since retired from being a conductor earlier this year in October, but the train he has helped bring back has brought joy to many, including myself. And if you want to see the original ski train's equipment, it's in service on the Algoma Central for the Agawa Canyon Tourist Train, and maybe I'll visit there myself someday, seeing the original train from the original equipment I ran on as a child. As for now, the Winter Park Express is in action, and hopefully some of y'all will avoid the pain and hell that is I-70 and take the train to the Winter Park ski slopes. Long may it run!
Hiawatha, Rio Grande, and a lino would just be dandy, and I want it right here. Forgive me for being crabby, and also a little snappy, and now yes I am so happy, at least till next year.